Prison escapes are often told like legends, clever plans, daring moves, and freedom won against impossible odds. But the truth is far darker. Behind most jailbreak stories lies panic, betrayal, bloodshed, and consequences no one escapes from. When prison breaks go wrong, they don't end with freedom. They end with manhunts, funerals, ruined lives, and systems exposed at their weakest points. From the frozen backwoods of New York to explosive breakouts in South America, this documentary uncovers real prison escapes that shocked the world. Not because they succeeded, but because of how badly they failed. These are not stories of victory. These are warnings. The Dannemora escape, a plan that turned into a death sentence. Clinton Correctional Facility sits in the remote town of Dannemora, New York, isolated, cold, and designed to break the spirit of the men inside it. Known as Little Siberia, the prison housed some of the most dangerous inmates in the state. Thick concrete walls, steel doors, and decades of security protocols made escape seem nearly impossible. But in 2015, two convicted murderers proved that the greatest weakness of any prison is not the walls. It is the people inside them. Richard Matt and David Sweat were not impulsive criminals. They were patient, observant, and deeply manipulative. Over months, they studied the routines of guards, maintenance schedules, and blind spots in supervision. Their plan was not rushed. It was slow, calculated, and aided by a failure no prison wants to admit: insider assistance. Using smuggled tools, including hacksaw blades hidden in frozen meat, the men began cutting through steel walls inside their cells. Night after night, they worked quietly, concealing their progress behind blankets and careful timing. The prison's outdated infrastructure worked in their favor. Old pipes, neglected maintenance corridors, and blind areas created opportunities no modern blueprint would allow. At the center of this breach was Joyce Mitchell, a civilian prison employee assigned to the tailor shop. She provided tools, access, and emotional support, manipulated through flattery, attention, and promises of affection. Mitchell later claimed she never intended for the escape to succeed. But by the time the plan reached its final phase, intention no longer mattered. On the night of June 5, 2015, Matt and Sweat crawled through a labyrinth of pipes and tunnels beneath the prison. They emerged outside the walls, leaving behind neatly folded clothes in their cells, a quiet insult to the system that failed to stop them. By morning, the prison discovered the impossible. Two convicted killers were gone. The response was immediate and massive. Over 1,300 law enforcement officers flooded the region. Helicopters scanned dense forests. Tactical teams set up armed checkpoints across rural roads. Residents locked their doors, schools closed, and the entire state watched as the manhunt grew more desperate by the hour. But escape does not equal freedom, especially when panic sets in. Richard Matt and David Sweat split up in the wilderness, a fatal decision driven by fear and exhaustion. Matt, older and more reckless, became increasingly aggressive. He broke into a hunting cabin, stealing food and weapons. Each move left a trail, footprints, fingerprints, and witnesses. On June 26th, 3 weeks after the escape, police cornered Matt near Malone, New York. He was armed, agitated, and unwilling to surrender. Officers opened fire. Richard Matt died where he stood, his escape ending not with freedom, but with a gunshot in the woods. David Sweat lasted 2 days longer. On June 28th, a state trooper spotted Sweat near the Canadian border. When Sweat ran, officers fired. A bullet tore through his torso, collapsing him to the ground. Bleeding and weak, Sweat was captured alive. His journey ended not across a border, but on a stretcher surrounded by armed guards. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Joyce Mitchell was arrested, charged, and sentenced to prison. Prison officials were fired. Investigations exposed severe security failures, ignored warnings, and a culture of complacency. Clinton Correctional Facility became a national symbol of what happens when systems rely too heavily on routine and underestimate human manipulation. For the public, the escape shattered any romantic idea of jailbreaks. There was no clever victory, no happy ending. One man died, another returned to a cell under even harsher conditions, and an entire prison system was left exposed. The Dannemora escape did not prove that prisons are easy to defeat. It proved something far more disturbing, that even the strongest walls cannot protect against neglect, corruption, and misplaced trust. And this was only the beginning. Explosives, helicopters, and chaos. When escapes turn into urban war zones. Not all prison escapes happen in silence. While some inmates crawl through tunnels and shadows, others choose speed, violence, and spectacle. In parts of Latin America, prison breaks have unfolded not as secret operations, but as full-scale assaults, involving explosives, automatic weapons, and even helicopters. These escapes shocked the world not only because of their audacity, but because of the chaos they unleashed on civilians far beyond prison walls. Brazil has long struggled with overcrowded prisons and powerful criminal organizations that operate both inside and outside correctional facilities. In some regions, prisons are not merely holding centers. They are command hubs. Gang leaders continue to issue orders, manage drug routes, and coordinate violence while behind bars. When escape plans are made, they're often backed by resources rivaling those of small military units. One of the most notorious examples occurred in 2018, when inmates staged a coordinated escape using explosives and heavy firearms. The plan was not subtle. Armed accomplices attacked the prison perimeter from the outside, while inmates prepared to breach internal barriers. Explosions tore through reinforced gates. Gunfire echoed through nearby neighborhoods. Guards were overwhelmed within minutes. Dozens of inmates poured out into the streets. For civilians living nearby, the escape felt like the sudden eruption of a war zone. Residents hid in their homes as bullets struck walls and vehicles. Emergency services were frozen, unable to move safely through the area. What began as a prison break immediately became a public safety crisis. Law enforcement responded with force. Military police units were deployed. Roadblocks went up across entire districts. Helicopters tracked fleeing suspects as they scattered into surrounding cities and rural areas. Within days, several escapees were killed in shootouts. Others were recaptured, bloodied, and exhausted. Some simply vanished, absorbed back into criminal networks. Freedom, for most of them, lasted only hours. In Mexico, escape attempts have taken a different but equally dangerous form: tunnels. Nowhere was this more dramatically demonstrated than in the case of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. While his 2015 escape from maximum security prison initially embarrassed authorities, the aftermath revealed the true cost of such operations. The tunnel used in Guzman's escape was nearly a mile long, equipped with ventilation, lighting, and a modified motorcycle on rails. It represented months of planning, millions of dollars, and deep corruption. But while Guzman briefly regained freedom, the response from authorities was relentless. A nationwide manhunt followed, leading to violent clashes, arrests, and widespread instability. His eventual recapture came at a heavy price. Dozens of deaths tied to cartel violence triggered by the intensified pursuit. The escape did not reduce bloodshed. It multiplied it. Helicopter escapes represent another escalation. In multiple countries, including Brazil and France, criminals have used hijacked helicopters to lift inmates directly from prison courtyards. These escapes are fast, shocking, and terrifying for guards and inmates alike. But they are also extremely visible, making evasion nearly impossible. In one Brazilian case, armed men landed a helicopter near a prison wall, exchanging gunfire with guards as an inmate was pulled to safety. The entire operation lasted minutes. The manhunt lasted weeks. Roadways shut down. Airports went on alert. The escapee was eventually tracked down and killed during a police raid. The message was clear: spectacle attracts consequences. What these escapes reveal is a critical truth. High-profile breakouts rarely succeed long-term. They trigger overwhelming responses from the state. Military units, intelligence agencies, and international cooperation come into play. Borders tighten. surveillance intensifies. For inmates, life on the run becomes a constant cycle of fear, betrayal, and violence. Many escapees are killed not by police, but by rival gangs. An escaped inmate represents risk, someone who can expose secrets, attract attention, or disrupt power balances. In criminal ecosystems, loose ends are dangerous. Inside prisons, the consequences are equally severe. After violent escapes, conditions tighten dramatically. Lockdowns become routine. Privileges disappear. Innocent inmates suffer harsher confinement as administrations scramble to reassert control. Guards adopt more aggressive postures. Violence inside the walls increases. In Brazil, several deadly prison riots followed failed escape attempts. Retaliation between rival factions led to massacres inside overcrowded cells. Bodies piled up not because of escape, but because of what escape attempts disrupted. The public often sees these events as thrilling headlines. Helicopters, explosions, dramatic footage. But behind every image is a trail of damage. Guards injured or killed. Families displaced. Communities terrorized. And inmates who believed escape was the answer, only to discover that the outside world is far more unforgiving than the cell they left behind. When prison escapes turn violent, they do not end at the gates. They spill outward, transforming cities into battlegrounds and exposing how fragile public safety can be when criminal power meets institutional weakness. These are not stories of freedom won. They are stories of systems collapsing under pressure and of men who mistook chaos for opportunity. The illusion of the perfect escape when planning meets reality. Every prison escape begins with a belief. The belief that careful planning can outsmart an unforgiving system. Inmates trade stories, study past breakouts, and convince themselves that intelligence and patience will succeed where brute force fails. But history repeatedly proves the same truth. Even the most detailed escape plans collapse when confronted with reality. One of the most famous examples is the 1962 escape from Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. Often portrayed as the ultimate successful jailbreak, the escape of Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin has been romanticized for decades. But beneath the legend lies a far darker possibility. Alcatraz was designed not just to confine, but to eliminate hope. Surrounded by freezing waters and powerful currents, the island prison relied on geography as its final defense. Morris and the Anglins spent months widening ventilation openings with makeshift tools, crafting dummy heads to fool guards during nightly checks, and assembling a raft from stolen raincoats. On June 11th, 1962, they vanished into the darkness. What followed was silence. Despite extensive searches, no bodies were recovered. No confirmed sightings were ever verified. Authorities concluded that the men likely drowned in the icy San Francisco Bay. Later evidence, fragments of the raft, scraps of clothing, supported this conclusion. The escape plan worked perfectly on paper. Nature did the rest. For every inmate who believes meticulous planning guarantees survival, Alcatraz stands as a warning. Freedom isn't won when you leave the cell. It's tested by what comes next. The same illusion played out decades later in Europe. In France, several high-profile inmates attempted escapes through bribery, tunnel construction, and external assistance. One particularly well-documented case involved a long-term inmate who spent years secretly digging a tunnel beneath his cell using stolen tools and crushed concrete concealed in plumbing systems. When the tunnel finally broke through, the escapee emerged not into freedom, but into surveillance. Motion sensors triggered alarms. Thermal cameras picked up movement. Within minutes, guards surrounded the exit. The inmate surrendered without resistance, his years of planning undone by technology he had not accounted for. Modern prisons have adapted. While walls may look unchanged, surveillance has evolved. Cameras see in darkness. Algorithms track behavior patterns. Inmates who alter routines, skip meals, or move suspiciously are flagged long before they reach the perimeter. In Canada, a failed escape attempt in the early 2000s demonstrated another flaw in long-term planning: trust. Two inmates plotted an escape with outside accomplices who were supposed to provide transportation and shelter. When a moment came, the accomplices panicked. The vehicle never arrived. The inmates were captured within hours, soaked from rain, injured, and abandoned. Inside prison culture, betrayal is expected, but escape plans demand absolute loyalty. That contradiction is fatal. Many escapes fail because inmates underestimate exhaustion. Tunnels collapse. Walls cut too slowly. Physical strength fades. Hunger and dehydration impair judgment. What begins as confidence becomes desperation. In one documented European case, inmates escaped through a sewage system after months of preparation. Once outside, they were unable to remove the stench that clung to their bodies. Hotel staff alerted authorities. Surveillance footage traced their movements. They were rearrested within a day. The escape succeeded. The survival failed. Psychologically, escape attempts often reveal the toll of long-term incarceration. Isolation distorts risk assessment. Inmates convince themselves that death is preferable to confinement. That mindset leads to reckless decisions: swimming across icy waters, climbing razor wire, confronting armed guards. In the United States, multiple escapees have been killed during traffic stops or home invasions while seeking food or shelter. These deaths rarely make headlines. They are recorded quietly, footnotes to an escape that briefly captured public attention. When escapes fail, consequences are permanent. Survivors are placed in solitary confinement. Sentences are extended. Privileges are revoked. Parole becomes nearly impossible. Even inmates who were once low profile become permanent security risks. The myth of the perfect escape persists because failure is less glamorous than fantasy. Movies end at the moment of freedom. Real life continues with pain, fear, and consequences. Alcatraz did not prove that escape is possible. It proved that uncertainty is unavoidable. Planning can defeat guards. It cannot defeat physics, psychology, or chance. Every prison escape story shares the same ending. Not at the moment of escape, but at the moment reality catches up. And it always does. Manhunts, mistakes, and the moment everything falls apart. The moment an escape is confirmed, the balance of power shifts instantly. The inmate is no longer hiding from guards inside a controlled environment. They're now hunted by an entire system designed to track, surround, and eliminate threats. This is where most prison escapes truly fail. Not at the wall, not at the tunnel, but during the manhunt. Manhunts are overwhelming by design. Law enforcement floods an area with visibility and pressure. Helicopters dominate the sky. Dogs track scent trails. Surveillance cameras expand outward from the prison like ripples in water. Checkpoints appear on highways and back roads. The escaped inmate is forced to keep moving, and every step increases the chance of exposure. In rural areas, escapees often believe isolation offers safety. Dense forests, farmland, and abandoned buildings appear ideal for hiding. In reality, these environments work against them. Movement is easier to track. Strangers stand out. Locals notice unfamiliar faces immediately. This mistake proved fatal for many escapees across North America and Europe. In several U.S. cases, inmates fleeing into wooded areas underestimated the physical toll. Without proper supplies, dehydration sets in within days. Injuries go untreated. Small cuts become infected. Sleep deprivation clouds judgment. Hunger drives increasingly risky behavior. Eventually, escapees must interact with civilians. That interaction almost always ends a run. Escaped inmates break into cabins, vehicles, and homes looking for food, clothing, or weapons. Each theft generates evidence: fingerprints, DNA, witness descriptions. Surveillance footage from gas stations and rural stores becomes invaluable. What feels like survival to the escapee appears as a clear trail to investigators. In Canada, a multi-day manhunt ended when an escapee attempted to steal a vehicle from a farmhouse. The owner recognized prison-issued footwear and alerted authorities. The inmate surrendered without resistance, shaking and exhausted. His escape ended not with gunfire, but with quiet realization. In more violent cases, panic leads to deadly outcomes. When escapees feel cornered, they may brandish weapons, real or improvised. Police are trained for this moment. Commands are shouted. Seconds matter. Across Europe, multiple escapees have been shot during confrontations triggered by sudden movements or refusal to surrender. These deaths are later scrutinized, debated, and reviewed, but the outcome remains the same. The escape attempt ends in a body bag. Manhunts also expose a psychological breakdown that planning cannot prevent. Isolation erodes confidence. Paranoia takes hold. Every sound becomes a threat. Every helicopter feels closer than it is. Escapees begin to make irrational decisions, traveling during daylight, approaching populated areas, or trusting strangers. Trust is the final mistake. Several infamous escapes collapsed because escapees contacted old associates. Phones were tapped. Messages were traced. Family members were monitored. Even indirect communication triggered law enforcement responses. Digital footprints replaced physical ones as the primary tool of capture. In one European case, an escapee used a public internet cafe to check news coverage of the manhunt. Cameras recorded his face. Within hours, police closed in. He was arrested without incident, defeated not by walls, but by curiosity. Manhunts also create collateral damage. Communities are locked down. Schools close. Armed officers patrol neighborhoods. Innocent civilians are questioned, searched, and frightened. The public support for recapture becomes overwhelming. Tips flood in. For escapees, this environment feels suffocating. There's no safe place, no neutral ground. Every road leads back to a cell, or worse. Inside prisons, manhunts trigger internal consequences. Entire facilities go into lockdown. Inmates unrelated to the escape lose privileges. Tensions rise. Violence increases. Guards become more aggressive. Trust between staff and inmates erodes further. The escape attempt punishes everyone. Eventually, exhaustion wins. Most escapees are captured within days or weeks. When recaptured, they are often injured, malnourished, and mentally broken. Interviews reveal the same realization. The outside world is not freedom. It is exposure. Those who survive return to harsher confinement. Solitary housing. Constant monitoring. No second chances. Their names become case studies and training manuals. Examples of how not to escape. The manhunt is not a chase. It is a countdown. And when it ends, it always ends the same way. With control restored, consequences enforced, and the illusion of escape completely destroyed. After the escape, the punishment that never ends. When the manhunt ends, the cameras leave, and the headlines fade, the true consequences of a prison escape begin. For surviving escapees, capture is not a return to normal incarceration. It is a permanent transformation of their existence. The prison system does not forget escape attempts. It remembers them forever. Recaptured inmates are immediately placed under the highest security conditions available. Solitary confinement is often the first stop. Cells are smaller, quieter, and designed to eliminate any opportunity for communication or planning. Lights stay on longer. Movement is restricted. Human contact is reduced to the bare minimum. The psychological toll is severe. Studies and internal prison reports show that inmates who attempt escape suffer long-term mental deterioration after recapture. Anxiety, paranoia, and depression intensify. Trust evaporates, not only toward guards but toward other inmates. Escape attempts mark prisoners as liabilities, and liabilities are isolated. Sentences grow longer. Parole opportunities vanish. Inmates who once had release dates now face decades more behind bars. In some jurisdictions, escape attempts lead to new felony charges stacked onto existing convictions. Freedom moves further away than it ever was before the attempt. Inside the prison population, escaped inmates return as pariahs. Fellow prisoners may admire the attempt, but admiration is fleeting. The lockdowns and restrictions caused by escapes breed resentment. Inmates who lose privileges because of someone else's actions do not forgive easily. Violence against return escapees is common. Guards, too, change. Correctional officers become more rigid, more suspicious, more distant. Every interaction is filtered through the memory of failure. Where there was once routine, there is now vigilance. Where there was trust, there is procedure. The institution hardens. Prison administrations respond to escapes by tightening control across entire systems. Surveillance expands. New barriers are installed. Civilian access is reduced. Staff training becomes more aggressive. These changes are expensive and often paid for with public funds. The cost of one escape can reach millions of dollars. Yet despite all this, escape attempts continue. Why? Because prison erodes time. Days blur into years. For inmates serving long or life sentences, the future feels abstract. Escape becomes less about freedom and more about reclaiming agency, even if the price is death. This mindset explains why inmates swim across icy waters, charge armed guards, or run in open fields under helicopter surveillance. The logic is simple and terrifying. Anything is better than staying. But history tells a different story. From Dannemora to Brazil, from tunnels to helicopters, prison escapes rarely end in victory. They end in gunfire, shackles, isolation, and silence. They expose corruption and system failures, but they also reveal the brutal reality of escape, that the outside world offers no mercy to those marked by the system. The myth of the successful escape survives because we prefer legends to consequences. Movies fade to black at the moment of freedom. Real life continues, with broken bodies, extended sentences, and lives reduced to footnotes. Every escape attempt leaves scars on prisons, on communities, on families, and on the escapees themselves. The walls may be breached, but the system adapts. It always does. In the end, prison escapes don't prove that confinement is weak. They prove that desperation is powerful, and that it almost always destroys the people who embrace it. Prison escapes captivate us because they promise something rare, defiance against control. But when the dust settles, the truth is unavoidable. Most jailbreaks don't lead to freedom. They lead to funerals, longer sentences, and lives permanently sealed behind thicker walls. These stories matter because they expose what happens when systems fail and what happens when desperation takes over. They remind us that prison isn't just a place. It's a force that reshapes everyone it touches. If you want more true stories that go beyond the headlines, real prison cases, real consequences, and the truths no one wants to talk about, then this channel is for you. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and stay with us as we uncover what really happens behind the walls. Because some stories aren't meant to be escaped, they're meant to be told.